Welcome to Fellowship Safaris, conversations about people of color and their journeys to subspecialist training in their countries of origin and around the world. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Fellowship Safaris podcast. My name is Dr. Jerry Kariajahe. I'm a consultant pediatrician and adolescent medicine specialist based in Nairobi, Kenya. Today, I have such an honor to be able to have one of my dear friends from far away. She and I became friends and colleagues through the Adolescent Medicine Fellowship. And without further ado, and without getting too far ahead of myself, I'd like for her to introduce herself and her professional qualifications.
Thank you, Jerry. Hi, my name is Hana Hana Shamsuddin. People just call me Hana. I am an adolescent and family medicine specialist and also a clinical lecturer.
All right.
I'm currently in Malaysia in one of the universities and university hospital.
Okay. Karibu sana and welcome, Hana. We're so glad that we get to do this with you. And I recognize that there's a bit of a time difference. However, I'm so glad that you've been able to make it. And I want to start by asking, what made young Hana think about medicine as a career?
Oh, young Hana, that's a long time ago. I guess ever since I knew that I had to have a job, an occupation, when I grew up, I wanted to be a doctor. And that was quite young, even before I started primary school. I guess I had good experiences with my pediatricians, and I love the way that they interacted with me and made me feel better. Yeah, that's when I started to know that I wanted to be a doctor.
And fast forward just a little bit while you were still younger, are there elements in your childhood that made you want to go towards that, apart from being able to visit the doctor and being able to be cared for by very compassionate people? Are there other things in your childhood that drove you towards that?
I've always wanted to help people in a personal way. And I guess helping people being healthy meant a lot. Initially, I wanted to help children because I watch a lot of TV. And when I was young, it was always on the news that these children needed nutrition, needed healthcare. And that's where I started wanting to be a doctor, basically to help people to get people healthy so that they can have a good life.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And what made you think about becoming a family physician?
When I had my family, I actually sat for my part one in the MRCP-CH. It was the first year they changed the format to the current format. And during that time, I still wanted to be a pediatrician, but I just had my second baby. I sat for the exam during my confinement. So I actually went to the exam half-heartedly, knowing that if I go down this line, there will be a lot of things that I would miss. Seeing them grow up, a stress-free breastfeeding period, being in a hospital with on-calls. So then I decided not to pursue being a hospitalist. And in Malaysia, if you want to be a pediatrician, you start off your early career and quite advance into your career in the hospital. And it's quite busy specialty to be. Then I discovered that family medicine was an option. And at that point of time, I was actually in a health clinic. So I had good mentors or examples for me to look up to. My family medicine specialist in the clinic was very understanding, outgoing, and she had a very positive outlook about everything. And when I asked about family medicine, what does she think about it? She said, "Oh, it's something that you want to do. It's something that you can do, and so why not?" I tried, and then I met another specialist from the university. We did a project together, and she actually offered me a place in the university if I pursued family medicine. So, yeah, that's where I started. So, after I finished my breastfeeding two of my elder children, I went on to do my residency in family medicine and joined the university.
Oh, wow. You pursued the family medicine residency with two children. How was that?
It was quite an adventure, a challenge. But I was not alone because here, a lot of the other doctors, when we go into residency, we already have established a family. And at that point of time, my eldest two was 4 and 2. And I was very lucky, and I thank God for that because I had very good support from my family. I live near both my parents and my in laws. I had my husband who was able to be a bit flexible in terms of his job too. So I did a lot of commuting between my place and where I did my residency. And the first 2 years of my residency in family medicine was pure hospital based. But because it was in the university hospital, I was not required to do any overnight on calls, just tagging until like 10 p.m. because it was a different setting. Whereas if I was placed in the government hospital, I probably would have gone through all the on calls and stuff. And things might have been different because it really did affect me when I had limited time with my children as they were growing up at that point of time.
It's so interesting to hear about how things just fall in place and how they just come together in such a beautiful way. The sacrifice was commuting. However, you got to see your children and be at home every evening. And that's such a fantastic thing of how that came together. You mentioned about a couple of mentors who really were great guides to you. Generally, as a professional, what are two or three things you typically look for in a mentor? Like, what are the things that make you say, this is the thing that makes me want to approach this person or look up to them as a mentor?
First of all, their outlook towards the learning process itself and how they see their specialty. You can really tell that people do family medicine because it's something that they are really passionate about. So having a mentor passionate about doing that specialty was very important for me. And on the other hand, having a mentor that was able to balance between the family and the specialty and the patients and the clinic and being ahead managing the clinic was very important to me to see that those are things that I would be able to do if somebody else have done it.
That's so insightful. Thank you so much, Hannah, because I think one of the things in terms of questions that come up is what do you look for in a mentor? And I know a lot of the people who are coming behind us, those who are younger than us, who we have become their mentors. I'm always like, what are you guys looking for in a mentor? Because I know what I'm looking for, but what are you guys looking for? And so that's really, really helpful to hear. And so I heard you mention in your introduction that you are a lecturer and a teacher. Did you always know that after you'd done your residency, that going into teaching was something that you would go into? Was it something that you naturally went into, or is it something you sought after?
going into teaching, it was automatic for me because the job came as a teaching position with a prerequisite that I go through residency and become a specialist before I could be a lecturer. I guess growing up, I've always seen teaching as one of my pathways. My father lectures in a university, so I've been very close to university and always see how much it is important. If we have knowledge, we have to pass it on because that's our responsibility as somebody that have that knowledge. And even if I was outside of academia, for myself, as I mentioned, I had a mentor. She was not part of the university. I was always getting lessons from her. So it's part of something that I feel is natural for me to follow.
I love how you say it is natural for you. And I've seen that because, being in the department with you, being able to go through different discussions. And I do remember there was a time, I think you did a presentation and everybody was just like, wow, you're such a great teacher. And it's so fantastic to hear that you come from a long line of teachers. I just want to pivot a little bit and just ask, so now you're a lecturer, you're doing family medicine and you are thriving in that. How did the question around adolescent medicine, how did that come about?
I guess it came to me gradually because, as I mentioned before, a medical student, as a young doctor, I initially thought my path was going down to be a pediatrician. But I found that there is such a speciality in between adults and children, which is adolescent. And it was so perfect for me at that point of time. It wasn't my initial path that I always thought for myself. But then at that point of time, I was already raising up my 3 children, which were all in 3 different stages of the adolescence, which is the older adolescent, peak adolescent time, and also a child that is transitioning into young adolescenthood. So, as probably you can tell, family meant a lot to me, especially my children. And there wasn't any other specialty more perfect for me at this point of time, more than adolescent medicine. On top of that, I have been facing struggles and challenges understanding this period. My children have had their challenges in terms of medical conditions, which is related to the adolescent period. And thus, when I seek the knowledge to become an adolescent, such as it only strengthens my ability to mother or parent the children, which meant more to me than anything else. And I feel that when I go into the specialty, I have the opportunity to learn more and help other parents and help other adolescents to be healthier adolescents because I know that they are the future of our country and thus the whole world.
Again, I am always amazed with you, Hannah, in the sense that you were like, okay, there are these things about my teens that I need to learn, but why stop at the benefit being just within my family? Why don't I extend it to other adolescents as well? That's such an amazing thing to not only think of yourself, but also think about other parents who must be going through similar struggles, trying to figure out what do we do with these young people. And so, with this passion burning deep in your mind and in your heart, how did you land on Canada being the place that you could do the adolescent medicine fellowship?
In Malaysia, actually, adolescent medicine is specific for pediatricians, but I was the first one in my department and perhaps the only one to go down a subspecialty pathway. Most of my colleagues went down the PhD pathway. So when I did my study plan to get the scholarship for subspecialty, I needed to have at least 6 months to 1 year overseas. And I was looking through all the options that I have, and I found the adolescent medicine curriculum, which Canada was one of the recommended places for them. So my subspecialty actually is adolescent health in primary care. I did 1 year, my first year in adolescent medicine in the center in Malaysia. It's a children's hospital in our capital. And there aren't many adolescent medicine specialists in Malaysia. So I went under the mentorship of one of the earliest specialists, and she was a great mentor until now. And with that, I got myself that opportunity to go for adolescent medicine in Canada, which also, like Malaysia, were only for pediatrician. But they were so kind, seeing that I had that 1 year under PEDS in my first year of my fellowship. So I was accepted to go to Canada to do that fellowship for another year. So in between my second year, I did adolescent health in primary care, which also included about 6 to 8 months in child and adolescent psychiatry and also gynae.
Wow. It seems like your pathway was very much cut out very strategically for you, because it sounds like a lot of people went down the PhD route. You took on adolescent psychiatry and gynecology and, going into adolescent primary care. And despite, it primarily being done by pediatricians, that you have been sort of like the pioneer in family medicine in your country to go into adolescent medicine.
Actually, in our country, in the ministry side, there are family medicine specialists doing adolescent health, which most of them will go for attachment in the hospital. But I'm privileged to have that one whole year off of my primary care to do a purely hospital based, which if I was in the Ministry of Health as a family medicine specialist, I would not be able to do that. So some of my other colleagues in the Ministry of Health who are family medicine specialists, they do attachments in the hospital, but probably not as long as I had the opportunity to do.
No, thanks for clarifying that. During the time of your fellowship, what were a couple of highs or high points in your fellowship in Canada?
I would say one of the highs is actually meeting people like you, having that opportunity to build such a wonderful network of colleagues from around the world. Like you're from Kenya, and then we have colleagues from Mexico and from Thailand, from Egypt, from the Arab countries, and also from Canada itself. I think that's the biggest high that I feel, because it's such a great opportunity to see and to hear and to share the experiences from other countries without having to go to the other country and being there myself. This and the experience I get in Canada itself enrich my learning process and enrich my practice when I come back here, in terms of seeing how different things are and things that could be improved and things that are good about what I already have here. So that experience is the best of my high. And the other thing is the mentors, the teachers that I met along my journey during my fellowship in Canada. They really taught me a lot about teaching and learning, which was a new experience for me. I've done my undergrad and my postgrad. In fact, I finished high school in Malaysia. I started my school in primary, in kindergarten, even in primary and junior high, and even in high school in US, in America. And intermittently, I was back home in Malaysia. So when I went to university, it was purely in Malaysia, and medical school in Malaysia is so different, and residency in Malaysia is so different from what I experienced in Canada. Being a mature student is also something that gives me an advantage in terms of seeing how different the generation that I am working with, because most of the fellows are younger than me. So when I be a lecturer and a teacher here, I am able to put myself in their shoes and see it through their learning, and remember how my teachers over there in Canada interacted with me, how they gave me feedback, and how I, as a learner, receive those feedback. And the comments that my fellow learners gave me also helped me understand my learners here. I feel that I am able to become a better teacher and a better practitioner. And of course, the third high is being able to explore Canada, having my family with me, going through places that we've never dreamt of being together, exploring. We went over to the west, to Vancouver, to Banff. It was amazing, and it was something that we felt like a lifetime trip. And my fellowship had brought my family there, which might have not been possible if the fellowship didn't happen.
Those are such amazing highs. And it's so great to hear even about your journey transitioning from lecturer to learner, back to lecturer, and how that experience has helped you be able to, it helped reframe rather how, you interact with your students and your learners back in Malaysia. I'm just wondering, those sound really, really amazing and very, very encouraging. However, did you encounter any lows during your fellowship?
Yes, of course. There won't be any highs if there weren't any lows. The biggest was realizing that I'm back at square one. I've always had a good handle on speaking English, even when I was small in university. Even we lecture in English and we learn in English back home here. However, when I went to Canada, I felt like a foreigner because I was a foreigner in a foreign country. But I didn't expect that, because I expected I would be able to communicate well with the people, with the patients, and even with my teachers and mentors. However, I found that that was a big challenge for me. I didn't realize that being in a place where English is a first language, practicing makes you feel different, makes you feel like you are coming from outside, because I'm always have been from the inside wherever I've been learning. And it took me a while. In fact, it took me until almost the end of my fellowship to be comfortable talking to people as a doctor there, or as a learner there with a teacher in English. I even had patients not understand what I said, even though felt that I spoke in English well. However, because of the cultural differences and the way that we use our words, it doesn't come out as something that is easily understood. And I find myself trying to explain and sometimes struggling to understand what they are saying. So back home in Malaysia, we come from a very diverse cultural background. We're multicultural. And I felt that I was totally culturally competent here. When I went there, I had to relearn all that stuff, because being culturally competent at one place in your home is different than being culturally competent in a place that you're totally foreign and you have other people from around the world.
It's so interesting that you mentioned the language piece, Hannah, because, during another conversation, you and I were saying, yes, we do everything in English in our countries. Like we teach in English,
Yeah.
we go to the shop, buy things in English. Of course, once in a while, we'll go into the country's dialect, but then largely we communicate in English. And I totally relate with that because there were a lot of colloquialisms in
Mm.
Canada where I'd find myself saying, what does that mean? Like, I know the words individually, but the way you've
Yeah.
put them together, I don't know what that is. Or even, the names of some things. Like, it was almost winter, and I was asked if I've bought a toque. And I was like, what on earth is a toque? And everyone's like, you don't know what a toque is? And I was like, no, I have no idea what a toque is. And so a toque was
Remind me
this.
what the cookies. I'm sorry.
So a toque is sort of like the hats you get
Oh,
during
yeah.
winter that, sort of keep you warm, keep your head warm. And I was just like, I had no idea. You could just call it a hat, though. But it was just, that was one of the examples where, yes, we speak English. And at the same time, there are all these other words that we had to learn while we were there. So I'm glad you brought that up. And also just that whole thing around cultural competency. And I remember, usually they send us these documents in advance and they're like, hey, please read on this before you come, in preparation. And I kept seeing this cultural competence. Like you, I had learned primarily in my country, in Kenya. And so that whole element around looking at things from different cultures outside of tribal divides. And by tribes, I mean, because there's so many tribes in Kenya, I didn't think about it beyond the tribes in our country in terms of just having a completely different setup where you have people from Africa, people from Asia, people from Europe, people from, quite literally everywhere, and trying to actively practice what competence looks like. So I really like how you are like, competence in this place looks different from cultural competence in another place. During the course of your fellowship, I heard you say earlier that you had traveled and you had your 3 teens with you. What was that experience like for you? And what was that experience like for them?
I guess because we're together, it really felt like their home. So it felt like we are okay, even though we're far halfway around the planet away from our real home. But because we're together, we're actually home. And having them with me was very important in terms that I wanted them to have the experience of seeing what it is like outside of what we are used to, how school is different, how people are different, the way people interact are different, how teachers are different. Because here, the school system is totally different and they are very focused on academics, and the teachers are still, I'm not sure what the teachers are like in Kenya,
Very
but
strict.
yeah, yes,
Very
very
strict,
strict.
very, very academics
Yes.
focused. Yeah.
Yes, and it's not teachers' fault that they are like that, but it's our education system is built like that. We also have to have uniforms. We also have to have our hair cut in a certain way. Our shoes, our socks have to be at a certain length, and you need to come to school at a certain time. You need to walk at a certain pathway, even if you are in school. And if you don't do that, they get penalized. So when they went there, they found that, oh, learning could be fun. It was different because my youngest one was in elementary school, and my second one was in high school. He was in grade 11. So high school grade 11 is a totally different environment than it is here back home. You get that 1 hour recess, you get to go out, and the kids wear whatever they want and they speak in however they want to. I was afraid that my son would go there and have some sort of culture shock, but I'm thankful he went there, he saw all that, but he learned how people are, and he learned who that he can approach, who he could not approach. And he learned to value the friends that he had here and to value the relationships he had here back home. He loved high school so much back there in Canada because he had this independence that he never knew that he could have, going to school on his own, on streetcars, on the subway. After school, he was able to roam around Toronto. When I asked him, if you were given a chance to live in Canada and migrate there, would you want to do that? He said, I would love to learn or do university or work back there in Canada. I love the places that I could go, the things that I could do. I wish only if my friends from home are there with me. I'm not sure whether it's because his friends make him feel at home or it's because he is at that age where friends means the world, and when they are not together they feel like there's somebody else. Another interesting thing that he said was, I might go and work overseas, but I want to die back home in Malaysia. So I'm very thankful for that in terms of being overseas, having living there for only 1 year, made them value and love their country more, and to have the end of their life at home rather than outside.
That's amazing. There's so many things about your son that amaze me every time when you talk about him and when you share about his various skills and talents and his insights on different things. And I absolutely love that. I think even before I say the next thing, I think it also speaks a lot to what you and your husband have done in terms of being very intentional with them and, being able to create platforms for them to be able to explore their gifts and their talents, and at the same time, exposing them to a different way of life, and then sort of telling them, hey, what if you had a choice? What would you do? And bringing up that conversation. So a very big up to you and your husband, because your kids are testament of all that you've poured into them over the years. And it's such an amazing thing as a younger parent to watch you do these things so intentionally with your children.
Thank you so much, Jerry, for putting that in where it really means a lot to me as a mother. We are intentional in parenting our children. However, we don't try to put them in certain boxes or lines. We encourage them to step out of that box and try to explore and see what's their limit. On the other hand, it's also quite difficult for us to let go in terms of wanting them to be safe, wanting them to be healthy, and wanting them to not lose the values we learn in our faith and in our own culture.
And that's an amazing segue into my next question. How did faith impact your learning experience while you are away from your home country?
My faith is everywhere I go. My faith doesn't need a specific place, it's everywhere. And it keeps me grounded in times that I feel lost. It gives me a place to go. And in times that I achieve highs or I feel thankful for something, I always go back to my faith, because I know that everything that a curse is planned by our God, and whether it's positive or whether it's a setback, there's always a reason to it. So I believe that having faith is very important for us to be true to who we really are.
So, fast forward in terms of now transitioning back from being a learner back to a teacher and being back to a lecturer. What was that transition for you as you went back home with this new knowledge, this new training, and the new skill set that you had?
I am thankful that I am in a department that is very supportive. My seniors and my superiors are very understanding, and they help me have a smooth transition. I feel that transiting back into my role as a teacher, as a specialist, a clinician, I became a better version of myself, both in family medicine and also in adolescent care. But I feel that there are things that I wish myself to be back as a learner, because when you go back as a teacher, there are so much more responsibilities that you need to meet, expectations of the university, of having research, of having grants. On top of that, having clinics, having patients, and trying to build a practice based on the subspecialty that they have sent you for, and also trying to transfer what I learned back there. So it's a big responsibility, and sometimes it could be overwhelming. But I think I'm coping quite well.
That is amazing to hear. Just that balance between it can get a bit overwhelming. However, you're up to task because you have these new skills and you're back in familiar stomping grounds, in terms of the workplace you were at before. I'm just wondering, in terms of when you look back over your learning experience, your journey as a learner, as a teacher, what would your advice be to somebody who's thinking about a fellowship and pursuing one?
If you have any thoughts of doing a fellowship, you should just dive into it and seek out all the opportunities that you have. Don't hold back. Go for whatever that you dream for. It's always achievable, even though you might not get a place that you hope for, or you might have difficulty being accepted, or you might have a lot of hurdles going to the place that you are going, like we did. Going to Canada, there was so many challenges in terms of COVID, the system, a lot of the documentations that we need to prepare. But I guess all of that, looking back, reflecting back, was every step of it. And there wasn't any hurdle I felt that I would not have gone through to get myself through the fellowship. In fact, now what is helpful is that before I went to Canada, we had a Canadian Malaysian WhatsApp group, Canadian Malaysian fellows, for fellows who are already there, previous fellows, and fellows who are coming. So that helped me greatly. And in terms of the application and stuff. So once you are back from your fellowship, you should help other people that are going. Like right now, we're still helping the new fellows, giving them points how to go through all these processes that is very overwhelming when you are doing it. But just remember, through every challenge, there is always something that will come out of it. Something good will come out of it.
It was such an amazing thing to actually see how Malaysian fellows supported each other and were very free flowing with information for people who are coming in terms of what they need to do, and that camaraderie while we were away. When all of us were away from our home countries, it was really admirable to see the community that the Malaysian learners, developed around each other. And it was just beautiful because I think some of my good friends are from Malaysia, yourself, Bo and Fazarina, who are in another episode. And it's just been an amazing thing to just see and experience and have our families interact with each other. And I'm so, so grateful for that opportunity with you, Hana. And even just being able to listen to your nuggets and just being able to listen to your experience and the various insights that you have. I am deeply grateful for that.
Thank you, Jerry. I'm grateful to be able to share with you. And just a note that when we are back home in Malaysia, we still do seek each other out and go out and have dinner, play, because we feel like time when we was in Canada, we were already like brothers and sisters, including you, Jerry. When we were in the same building, I felt that comradeship was very important to me, and it's something that I will hold through my life. And it's one of the things, apart from your academic and your clinical experience you get from the fellowship, is all these new relationships that you form and the bond.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think without fail, everybody who I've had the privilege of interviewing from our program says the fellows, what was the strength? The fellows, everyone is just like the fellows. And
Yeah.
I so appreciate that and being considered as part of you. And, we are honored as a family and for me as an individual. And I honor you, my friend. And I thank you so much for you agreeing to be on the podcast and being able to share this. And for our listeners, I'm really hoping that, you have questions and feedback for us concerning Hana's experience and what she's been able to share with us as a family physician, as a lecturer, as an adolescent medicine specialist in Malaysia. And we look forward to hearing on all social media platforms and, wherever you get your podcasts, reach out to us, send us messages. We'll also put a way that you can be able to communicate with Hana, either through an email or a social media handle. We'll put that in the notes as well, so that should you have further questions, you're able to reach out to Hana directly. All right. Until next time, bye everyone.
Bye.
I'm so glad you stayed tuned. Please get the word out and share it with at least 3 people. Make this episode like a chain letter. Share it, share it, share it. Come back for the next leg of our safari, where we'll be talking about
1, believe in yourself. And then once you've started the journey can be hard, but you have to determine why you are doing it and who you are doing it for. And what I would say is, don't do things for other people. Do it for yourself. And when you know whatever you're doing is for yourself, you're investing in yourself, in your future, it will help to keep propelling you forward even when days are difficult.
Listeners are advised to use their own judgment and discretion when applying any information discussed in this and all podcast episodes to their specific situation. Always seek the advice of a qualified professional if you have any concerns or questions regarding a particular subject matter. You can find this and other episodes of this podcast on our website at www.fellowshipsafaris.org. You can also find all our episodes on all podcast platforms. Reach out to us on social media as Fellowship Safaris on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, and our Twitter handle is @fellowshipsafar. You could also send us an email on fellowshipsafaris@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you and interacting with what you have to say about the Fellowship Safaris podcast. It takes a village to make this podcast. The executive producer and original music is done by Mokavi Maweu. The sound engineer is Tevin Sudi with thanks to AQ Studios. Graphic design was done by Benjamin Mboya. We would like to give a special shout out to Josephine Karianjahe and Melissa Mbogwa of Africa Podfest. All rights reserved by Dr. Jerry Karianjahe and the Fellowship Safaris podcast.